You shit-faced fuck-cock son of a... You assholes!
This is about how I feel every year when tax day rolls around. And my fellow Americans out there know exactly what I'm talking about. Our tax code is Byzantine, riddled with incomprehensible complexities. Each and every year, Americans collectively spend 6 billion hours filing their taxes. That's the equivalent to 685,000 years. In that amount of time, we could build the Great Wall of China 342 times. Tell Donald Trump I figured out how to build his border wall. The bottom line is that the US tax code is nonsense. But it doesn't have to be.
Bring down rates, broaden the base, simplify the code, need standards for growth.
Oh, we're gonna double down on the top down. America does best when the middle class does best.
Bring down rates, broaden the base,
Oh, we're gonna double down on the top down.
simplify the code, need standards for growth.
Oh, we're gonna top down on the double down
On the base.
Some of you might remember presidential candidate Mitt Romney. He ran in 2012 against then President Barack Obama, and in the first presidential debate, he expressed this concept known as BBLR, broaden the base, lower the rates. It's a pretty straightforward idea. The more people you have paying taxes, the lower rate you need to bring in the same amount of revenue. For example, if 2 people are taxed at 10% on $50,000, that's the same as 4 people being taxed at 5% on $50,000. Simple. So simple, you would think it would be easy to implement. After all, this is an idea both Republicans and Democrats can get behind. In order to broaden the base, you need to eliminate all the loopholes and deductions that corporations get, which is something Democrats want. And in doing so, you get to bring down the tax rate, which is something Republicans love. Not only that, but what makes the US tax code so complex and time-consuming is all of these loopholes and deductions. By eliminating them, you would save Americans billions of hours each and every year. It's a win-win-win for everybody. And in fact, the United States did pass a BBLR tax reform bill back in 1986 under every Republican's favorite president, Ronald Reagan. The bill enjoyed bipartisan support, partly because it reduced taxes on the rich from 50% to 28% and taxes on corporations from 48% to 34%. However, it eliminated so many loopholes and exemptions, corporations ended up paying an extra $120 billion over the next 5 years, hence why Democrats were a fan. This is actually the same tax code we have now, but over the past 3 decades, Congress has been relentless in adding deductions that benefit themselves or specific sects of their constituency. This has grown the IRS tax code into a behemoth, totaling nearly 4 million words. That's 1,000 times longer than the US Constitution. The sheer magnitude of credits, exemptions, and deductions totals a loss of $1.2 trillion in government revenue every single year. That's almost double what the US spends on defense. The simplest, best solution to this is to throw our current tax code into the garbage, set it on fire, and start fresh like we did in 1986. Yes, we would lose some of our favorite deductions, like the charity deduction, but this would be made up for by dramatically reduced tax rates. And not only that, but it would make filing your taxes a breeze, so Americans don't waste hours each and every year wanting to pull their hair out because it's so frustrating. The only thing that's really holding up this kind of reform are companies like TurboTax and H&R Block, who spend a fortune lobbying each year to ensure the tax code stays nice and complex. And of course, there are other corporations who save millions on deductions and are inclined to keep things just the way they are. Corporations also present a problem distinct from the principle of BBLR. No doubt many of you have heard of the term corporate inversion. This is when a company, desperate to avoid the 38% tax rate imposed on them by the US government, decides to take their business elsewhere. Except, not really. Burger King famously did this when they bought out the Canadian-based Tim Hortons in 2014. By making their legal headquarters in Canada, Burger King can avoid paying hundreds of millions of dollars in US taxes, despite the majority of their revenue and even strategic operations still taking place in the US. This is actually one of the less egregious forms of tax avoidance. Other companies like Google and Apple have gone so far as to create shell companies in foreign countries where taxes are more favorable. And in a both elaborate and ingenious scheme, Apple managed to create $74 billion in stateless income, which they paid no taxes on whatsoever. This has become such a problem that corporations now account for just 9% of the government's total tax revenue, compared to 33% in the 60s. This has shifted a lot of the tax burden to individuals like you and me. Companies are so desperate to avoid paying US taxes, they keep most of their money overseas. And the truth is, I don't blame them. The United States has one of the highest corporate tax rates in the world. Why would you pay hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes when you could pay a lawyer a tiny fraction of that to have your money taxed and kept in a foreign country? This tax rate creates a massive incentive for companies not to base themselves in the US. And what's worse is that it's entirely unnecessary. If we embraced the BBLR principle and eliminated all the deductions and credits US companies receive, we could lower the corporate tax rate to an extremely competitive 9%, about 1/4 of where it is at now, and still bring in the exact same amount of revenue. It's really just common sense. But as we know, common sense is not so common, and over the past 30 years, the IRS tax code has become bloated beyond all belief, and it's cost Americans millions of dollars and billions of hours each and every year. And to make things worse, we have one of the highest corporate tax rates, which practically forces companies to go overseas. And there is such an easy solution, one that both sides can agree upon. We need to start fresh with a new tax code that removes all the ridiculous loopholes and exemptions and credits, one that is simple and one that reduces the tax rate so Americans can have more time on their hands and more money in their pockets. Hey guys, thank you for watching this video. As always, please let me know what you thought in the comments below, or on Twitter or on Facebook. You can reach out to me there. And honestly, if you guys like this video, if you agree that we need to completely redo the tax code and bring down the rates, then tweet this to your local representatives. I know a lot of us, certainly me in the past, have no idea who our representatives are, but you can reach out to a lot of them on Twitter and Facebook and all the same places you reach out to me and your friends and everyone else. And it's a good way to push them in the direction we want them to go. Anyway, guys, that's all for me. I hope you have an awesome weekend. I'll see you next Friday. All right, goodbye.